A busy week at the State House as lawmakers and leaders took up big issues, everything from the presidency to protecting community pharmacies. Ahead on Face the State.
This is very important that both President Biden and President Trump be on the ballot in Ohio.
It's the head-to-head contest voters expect, but is not set in stone in Ohio just yet. The latest on efforts to make sure President Biden is on the Ohio ballot. Also, understaffing equals a patient care crisis. That's the message Ohio nurses delivered during a rally at the State House. They're calling for change. Hear what they want and the response to it from the Ohio Hospital Association. Plus, opportunities for Ohioans with disabilities. It's a state agency helping tens of thousands of those with disabilities live full, rich, independent lives. We'll look at its mission and the services it provides. Thanks for joining us for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. Whether President Joe Biden will appear on the November ballot here in Ohio is still officially up in the air, but state leaders on both sides and in both chambers say they are having discussions and negotiations to make sure it happens. Senate President Matt Huffman said the solution may be adding a provision to an existing bill, or it could be its own standalone measure. House leaders say they also want to fix the problem. The issue is that Ohio's deadline to certify a candidate on the ballot is August 7th, but the Democratic National Convention won't officially nominate President Biden until August 19th, almost 2 weeks later. To fix this, the Democratic National Committee can either move up its nominating convention, or the state legislature can create an exception and allow President Biden to be on the ballot. Governor Mike DeWine weighed in on this past week.
This is very important that both President Biden and President Trump be on the ballot in Ohio. They're going to be on the ballot. We've got some technicalities that are going on, but it's going to get worked out. So no one should really have any concern. They're going to have a choice this November. They're going to be able to pick one of these two as to be our next president.
Republican and Democratic leaders in the House also say discussions are going on about how to possibly fix the situation, and they both want a longer-term legislative solution.
I think it would be important that we fix this going forward, because one time there will be, the Republicans may fall into this situation in the future.
From my perspective, continuing to do this temporarily is just setting us up for this to come up again into the future. So all those discussions are happening, but also legislative is not the only approach either.
Most recently, the General Assembly did make an exception in 2020 when both parties' national nominating conventions were held after the Ohio deadline. We'll keep you posted. It was a busy week at the State House with both the Ohio House and Senate in session. Lawmakers in the Senate passed a bill that eliminates exceptions to certain sex offenses that apply if the victim is the spouse. House Bill 161 now goes to the governor's desk. The offenses outlined are rape, sexual battery, unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, gross sexual imposition, and sexual imposition. The bill also allows a person to testify against their spouse in a prosecution for sex offenses. The bill passed the Senate unanimously.
I am grateful to finally see it come to fruition so that we can close this loophole in Ohio's law, providing protection to all survivors of sexual violence.
Currently, Ohio law says the spousal exception for rape applies only if the spouse lives with the offender. This bill will apply regardless of where they live. And in the House, lawmakers passed House Bill 230. It aims to increase penalties for drug and human trafficking. It also creates the offense of participating in an organization for trafficking people and makes that a first-degree felony. However, some lawmakers stress their concern with a part of the bill that removed the knowledge requirement for possessing a fentanyl-related compound. They argued it could get innocent people in trouble with the law. This bill now heads to the Senate. Nurses across Ohio are calling for change they say will help their own well-being and the well-being of their patients. They rallied at the State House this past week. They support a bill they say would help increase their numbers and relieve their job stress. This as a nursing shortage affects hospitals, nursing homes, and other facilities in Ohio and across the country. Their message was understaffing equals a patient care crisis. They say there aren't enough nurses and the stress and overwork are forcing many to leave the profession. The father of one nurse says for his daughter, the stress of the job and depression became too much to bear.
It's difficult. I was the one that found her.
Ron Smith's daughter, Tristan Smith, died by suicide last August at the age of 28. She was an emergency room nurse at a hospital in the Dayton area. He says the stress of her job affected her mental health, and he had tried to talk her into quitting nursing.
I told her, I said, Tristan, if you are crying before you're going to work because you don't know what kind of night you're going to have, if you're physically getting sick before you go into work, we need a different career here.
Now Ron is advocating for change.
I am here today in memory of a cherished life lost.
He shared Tristan's story at this nurses and healthcare professionals rally at the State House. Ohio Nurses Association President Rick Lucas says they support bipartisan House Bill 285. It would mandate minimum nurse-to-patient ratios in hospitals and create a loan-to-grant program to recruit more nurses.
For years, hospitals have been understaffed, leading to overburdened healthcare workers that are leaving the profession, leaving the bedside in droves.
A study in early 2023 by the National Council of State Boards of Nursing found around 100,000 nurses nationwide have left the profession since the COVID-19 pandemic. The bill's co-sponsor, Representative Elgin Rogers, says it is about retaining and recruiting nurses, but also about the patients.
We want to make sure that patients have the staffing ratio so that we can take care, the nurses can take care of our loved ones.
Co-sponsor, Representative Haraz Ganbari, says the Ohio Hospital Association acknowledged to him the challenges with nurse staffing, but believes hospitals need more flexibility with their own ratios.
What they've shared with me is this is an issue that they've been working on for some years, and my response is it hasn't gotten us to where we need to be right now.
While his heart aches over the loss of his daughter,
what do we want? Free staffing! When do we want it? Now!
Ron Smith says he'll pour his energy into the cause.
My role right now is to support this bill and get this bill passed.
I reached out to the Ohio Hospital Association. They sent a statement saying the association opposes House Bill 285 and the impact it would have on hospitals' ability to provide care. It says in part, per Ohio law, Ohio hospitals develop nursing service staffing plans by organizing internal committees of caregivers, including nurses, to make recommendations for staffing levels that provide both a safe working environment for employees and quality health care for patients. It goes on to say mandated approaches to nurse staffing limit innovation, reduce the flexibility needed to respond to patients' changing care needs, and increase stress on a healthcare system already facing an escalating workforce shortage. We have the full statement in this story on 10tv.com. The association spokesperson also pointed out that there are more than 24,000 job listings for nurses on the Ohio Means Jobs website. Now, if you or someone you know is having suicidal thoughts, call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Hotline. Someone is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to take your call. In an effort to combat big and small pharmacies from going bankrupt across the state, two lawmakers introduced a bill called the Community Pharmacy Protection Act. It's an issue we highlighted earlier this month. We told you how a local pharmacy owner had to close 4 of his stores, including one in Plain City. He said it's because his profits were being taken away by what are known as pharmacy benefit managers. 10 TV's Kevin Landers explains how this bill will combat that.
The lead sponsor of the bill says what's happening to big and small pharmacies is, quote, a health crisis. From January through March, more than 100 pharmacies have closed, according to state records. Sponsors of the Community Pharmacy Protection Act say the bill would prevent further closures by making drug prices more transparent so customers, pharmacies, and employers would know exactly what they're paying for.
If the PBMs would quit being greedy in the middle of this whole transaction and be transparent. If we're transparent, we'll know what they've done.
The bill's sponsors point to pharmacy benefit managers as reasons why drug prices keep going up. Under the bill, PBMs would be forced to be audited so that everyone would know where the money is going. Reporting from the State House, Kevin Landers, 10 TV News.
And you can find Kevin's full story on the independent pharmacy crisis in Ohio on 10tv.com/consumer-10. More state help could soon be on the way for the families who lost their homes when tornadoes hit Logan County on March 14th. While recovery work continues on the ground in Indian Lake, work is also happening at the State House. State leaders are working on details of a plan to help those affected. They hope to finalize it soon. State Representative John Cross represents the Indian Lake area. He told me members of the House and Senate and the governor's staff met Wednesday morning as they worked to figure out the best, fastest way to help those affected. Representative Cross says 250 housing units are still needed for those who lost their homes to the tornado. Governor DeWine recently requested the Small Business Administration issue a rapid disaster declaration for Logan County residents, families, and businesses. If granted, the SBA would make low-interest loans available to qualifying businesses and individuals. Cross says once that happens, the state can release money. He says it could be as much as $15 million to help the uninsured and underinsured with their long-term housing needs. He says that could possibly come as direct grants to people in need. One idea that had been floated was to use state funding to buy RVs for those people, but Cross says that would put the state in the position of having to own all the RVs after the fact. Representative Cross says he wants to keep the application process simple so people don't have to fill out a 30-page document. He also says they want to do it quickly to keep those people from moving out of the Indian Lake area permanently. Again, he and others hope to have a plan in place in May. Still ahead on Face the state agency with the perfect name to describe what it does. I'm talking with the Director of Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities next. And later, Mr. Lowry goes to Washington, why a Gahanna teacher will soon head to the White House. Welcome back to Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities is a state agency whose name explains exactly what it does. Its mission statement is to empower Ohioans with disabilities through employment, disability determination, and independence. It's been around for more than 50 years. One opportunity the agency didn't want anyone to miss was the recent total solar eclipse. It played a key role in the state getting 29 of these little green boxes to place at 29 of our state parks in the eclipse's path of totality. They're called light sound devices. They allowed those who are blind or visually impaired to hear the eclipse. As the eclipse passed over the light sensor inside the device, the tone changed, allowing them to follow along. The agency is also known for its vocational rehabilitation program. It served 34,000 people in that program last year. It also helped about 150,000 people figure out whether they medically qualify for federal disability benefits through the Social Security Administration. Joining me now to talk about the agency's mission and services is Kevin Miller, the Director of Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. Kevin, thanks for being here today.
Doug, great to be here. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. And speaking of that, I was with you out at Alum Creek State Park when those light sound devices were demonstrated before the eclipse. Pretty cool, special way to make sure that everyone was included in that once-in-a-lifetime event.
Absolutely. We really appreciated you being there, and it was just another example of Governor DeWine and Lieutenant Governor Houston's commitment to making sure that all Ohioans live up to their God-given potential. And you know, what we want to try to be able to do is to make sure everybody understands that no matter where you go and what you do, there's lots of Ohioans with disabilities, majority of them invisible, and how do we make sure that everybody's being thought of when they're doing something?
What role did the agency play in making sure that those devices were available?
Well, I got to give kudos to my good friend, Director Mary Mertz, who gave me a call and said, hey, Kevin, I saw this great article. From the Department of Natural Resources. And she said, I saw this article in National Geographic, and this astronomer has a friend who's blind, and they created these devices. Do you think we could get a couple? And I said, well, I don't know. Let's see what we can do. So we called Harvard, and we talked to the professor. We talked about the Accessible Ohio initiative that we have here. Started by Governor DeWine, and they said this is exactly the type of thing that we were hoping would happen. And so they sent us 29 of these devices, and we were off and running. So that's how it came about.
It all came together. Now, that was for the blind or visually impaired. You also have something that's very practical for deaf people in our community.
Yeah.
And what is that?
Well, there's two things. This is a second part of something that we had done for the deaf community. And this is a card that can help them during a traffic stop to help navigate. It's very nervous, as you can imagine, for anybody who's being pulled over by law enforcement. And it's to help them communicate with the law enforcement officer by being able to point to different things, why they're being pulled over. It also has a card for the law enforcement officer to be able to describe you're getting a warning, you're getting a ticket, whatever it may be. And this is kind of the second part of something that was done several years ago that I was helped draft legislation for something called the Communication Disability Law, which allows individuals to sign up through the Department of Public Safety's BMV that says, I have a disability that could make it more difficult for me to communicate. It's not for public record. The only people that could see it is law enforcement when they run the plate, to try to help make sure that there isn't any miscommunication, prepares the officer for one of the most dangerous things they do, which is approach the vehicle of any traffic stop.
How would somebody get one of those?
You can go right to our website.
Just print it off.
And you can print it off, and you can have it with you if it's something that you need.
All right, let's take a step back now and look at the big picture. So what is the overall mission of Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities?
Yeah, as you mentioned, we're over 50 years old. The impetus of vocational rehabilitation really starts from the GI Bill, from after World War II, men and women coming back, many of them with pretty significant physical disabilities. But as we've evolved, we're now looking at some 80% of disabilities, 1.6 million Ohioans self-describe as having a disability, and they're invisible. And so as we work on the vocational rehabilitation part, which is just a fancy word for saying we help people gain employment, as you gain employment, you gain independence. And that's the most important thing we want to try to push first when it comes to individuals with disabilities. So we can open up a case for anybody starting at age 14. I'd like to put a plug in. We should continue to talk about with children with disabilities. I have a child. He's now a young man with a disability, which is what got me into this game many moons ago. You can't stop talking about what it is you want to start doing. And so we try to help individuals. Sometimes it's as quick as a matter of days and weeks. Sometimes it's years to help individuals with disabilities gain employment.
You mentioned 14 years old for that program, but who do you help? Is there an age range? Is it people from all backgrounds, different disabilities?
Yes, you name it, we will serve. I think the most important thing is that it's a we proposition. We're here to help individuals from a variety of ranges, whether it's a physical disability, whether it's a developmental disability, whether it's deafness, blindness, whatever it may be. How do we help them navigate to be able to gain employment? I think one of the things you could probably maybe only put on a Post-it note that was positive out of the pandemic is that we saw many employers who were so desperate for employees where maybe they weren't thinking about this type of population. We saw a surge in being able to place individuals with disabilities in jobs. So this has continued the momentum of making sure people understand they're our neighbors, they're our loved ones, and they're looking to work.
Now, just the process of applying for disability benefits can be quite onerous, tedious, and lengthy. And your agency helps a lot of people. I think it was 150,000 just last year, kind of navigate that system.
Yeah, I think there's so much misinformation out there about the Social Security Administration, what's being done here in Ohio. So one of our divisions, the Division of Disability Determination, our part of that process is that you apply federally through your local federal office. We receive it and we what is called adjudicate the claim. This is where we determine if you actually meet the criteria that's set by the Social Security Administration and are able to receive benefits. No, you don't have to apply 3 times and get denied before you get it. The allowance rate is about 38% from your initial claim. You can appeal, and I think this is where, if you've seen news about this, where there's backlogs and things, many states are not like Ohio, where we do a very good job of making decisions within 100 days or so. And that's being appealed, and then it gets into the federal system, and that's where you see 2-3 years worth of backlog.
Now, you also have a relatively new initiative called Accessible Ohio. What's that about?
Very excited about this. This is something that I spoke to Governor DeWine about, and it was the easiest sell ever after I talked to him. He's like, well, why wouldn't we do something like that? This is something that is based through a concept called universal design. You saw a little bit about that with out at Alum Creek with the eclipse. How do we make sure that we're also, as someone who's going to work, that's great, so that we know that we're doing that, but they also want to go to a ball game. They want to go to see the Blue Jackets and want to go to an Ohio State game. How do we make sure we work with those entities to say, how could somebody who's blind or deaf or have a physical disability be able to navigate through that seamlessly? And that's what it means through universal design. You know, we've worked with the airport to train TSA agents on disability etiquette. That's part of an Accessible Ohio initiative. We've been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. These are consultations where we come in. It's from a partnership standpoint. We're not the ADA police. We're not here to tell you what you're doing wrong. We're here to say, how can we help you do things in a way that makes it more broad, that the employees are thinking that way, and then they have good ideas on how to say, well, we're hiring individuals with disabilities, or we know there are people here with disabilities who come in, how can we think about them and make their experience better?
It's a great program.
Yeah.
Making everybody feel more inclusive, included as well. Kevin Miller, thank you so much. If you'd like more information about what Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities does, you can check out their website. They are part of the state government. They're an official agency. Check them out if you need more information about any of these services that Kevin talked about today. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Well, Face the State will be right back with a story about the right way mentality and how it's leading a Central Ohio teacher and 2 of his students right to the White House.
And so it's really special to be able to represent them and represent all the other teachers in the state and be the one from Ohio that gets to go.
One local teacher is White House bound after he was named Ohio Teacher of the Year. Because of that honor, he's attending an official state dinner at the White House in May and bringing along 2 high school students. The students will get to learn from the White House Media Corps and be in the White House briefing room during the dinner. Teacher Mark Lowry says it is a special opportunity. 10 TV's Yolanda Harris has the story.
You know, we might as well take the extra day and get it done the right way.
That right way mentality is part of the reason why
I'm a pretty strict teacher in a lot of ways.
Mark Lowry was named Ohio's Teacher of the Year.
How much of this do you have covered so far?
The Gahanna-Lincoln teacher has led the school's broadcast journalism program for 5 years, a passion that began long before he started teaching.
A lot of the skills that I use today and that I teach the kids and, you know, the connections I still have, a lot of them do trace back to my time at Channel 10. Please go put your name on the board.
Lowry was a 10 TV sports producer in the 90s, and he says that passion for journalism influenced how he teaches students today.
Kids have to know that you're passionate about what you do and that every day matters, and my expectations never waver.
The students say that's what makes Mr. Lowry different.
In most classes in high school, I feel like the reaction is I would love to do less work for this class, but Mr. Lowry, he always pushes us to think about what we can do more.
See if there's a deficiency.
Senior Natalie Fogel is one of the 2 students who will be headed to the White House with him.
Dip my toes in the real world before I even go to college, and then also just it's something I'm never going to forget and something I'll always remember, and I'm very excited.
And I made the option available.
Lowry says the work and the dedication of his students are the reason why he was named Teacher of the Year.
Kids have never backed down from the challenges I give them. They embrace them and they work hard. Yes, if you needed something.
Lowry says he has requested appointments with Senators Sherrod Brown and J.D. Vance for when he is in Washington. He says he's going to advocate on behalf of all teachers in Ohio. Thank you for joining me this week for Face the State. I'm Doug Petcash. I'll see you next Sunday at 11:30. Have a great day.